Welcome everyone to History Gone Wilder, part of Half History Will Travel. I'm your host, the Wilder historian, Dr. Lucas Wilder, and last time, Logan continued into politics after the Civil War, but lost his Senate seat. Now he takes a brief hiatus from politics, only to come back with a vengeance. This also marks the end of the John A. Logan biography. If you'd like to vote on the next general to be covered, please join the Patreon page. As always, if you like what I do, please consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't done so already, join the Patreon page, and purchase something from one of my online stores. Every little bit helps. Thank you. When Logan lost his Senate seat, he lost his main source of income, leading to a stressful time in his life as he tried to live the same lifestyle that he had previously. By no means was he rich, but he lived beyond his means, which brought him to a financial crisis. He traveled to Denver, Colorado to speculate in a gold mine, attempting to invest in a get-rich-quick scheme, but none were to his liking. He traveled back to Illinois and sold some of his land in the southern part of the state, and to make ends meet he reopened his law practice. The enthusiasm for law had dwindled in Logan. Gone were the thrilling days of riding the circuit. Nevertheless, Logan used that profession to keep himself afloat financially. President Rutherford B. Hayes offered him a job as ambassador to a foreign country, but like all the other similar offers, he turned it down. He was determined to get back into politics in the United States. Richard Oglesby's seat in the U.S. Senate was coming up, and Logan was determined to grab it for himself, despite Oglesby wanting to keep it. Logan started up his political machine, using his power as a state political boss to start grabbing up voters, especially the veteran vote. Mary began to campaign for her husband, convincing legislators and other politicians to put their support and vote behind Logan. Blackjack won the seat and made a triumphant return into Washington, D.C., greeted by the formerly enslaved Frederick Douglas. After his time as the President of the United States, Ulysses S. Grant and his wife embarked on a world tour. When they returned, the American public clamored for Grant, forgetting the political scandals that encompassed his presidency. Many politicians supported Grant for an unprecedented third term as president. Logan was one of his biggest supporters for this additional term. As a U.S. Senator, Logan began to build a solid block of Republicans dedicated to putting Grant up as the Republican presidential nominee in the next election. One of the most important moments during this stint in the Senate for Logan was a bill that was introduced to reinstate the defamed Union General Fitzjohn Porter and give him back pay following a court-martial during the Civil War. Logan protested against Porter ever being reinstated or gaining any kind of dignity after his disobedience of orders that landed him in a court-martial in the first place. Logan delivered a 10-hour speech, split up over 4 days, denouncing Porter. The bill failed partially as a result of Logan's arguments and tirades against the former Union general, but later on Porter would become reinstated. Meanwhile, support for Grant as president built. Logan and other supporters of Grant would become known as the Stalwarts during this push for a third term. On April 16, 1880, in the Central Music Hall in Chicago, Illinois, Logan delivered a rousing speech supporting Grant. In it, he stated, "We are told we must have a plumed knight for president this time. In the person of U.S. Grant, we offer you the grandest knight who ever waved a plume or thrust a lance. He won his decoration on the field of battle. At the head of his brave Union Legion, he crushed the most audacious armies that ever waged war against their country. His plume is recognized as the symbol of constitutional liberty and equality by every man, woman, and child in the land. The orphans of the Union soldiers recognize it. The widow of Union martyrs recognize it. And the blind Union veterans touch it that they may be thrilled by the patriotic memories associated with it." Logan used Grant's presidential run to refight the Civil War. Former Confederates could be found in the halls of the Senate and the House of Representatives, and it disgusted Logan that someone he fought against was now making legislation alongside him. He metaphorically waved the bloody shirt of Union soldiers in the air as he delivered impassioned speeches denouncing those who stood in the way of a Grant presidency. During the county and state Republican conventions, Logan used his pull to get Grant supporters named as delegates to the National Convention. In an attempt to gain as many votes for Grant as possible, Logan convinced the delegates to the state's convention to agree to vote as one block, but when they got to the National Convention, the convention overturned that rule, allowing each delegate to vote individually. During the convention, Grant held his own, staying a solid frontrunner through numerous ballots against the other two most popular candidates, James Blaine and John Sherman. However, it all came tumbling down for Logan when both Blaine and Sherman's names were withdrawn. With those two men out of the running, it allowed for a dark horse candidate, James Garfield, to grab the necessary amount of votes. After the convention, Logan agreed to support Garfield as president, but he personally didn't care for him. Logan thought Garfield unmanly when he heard that when Garfield found out he was being investigated in the Credit Mobilier scandal years earlier, that he broke down and cried. Logan felt that a man should own up to his mistakes and take responsibility. To cry over such an action was too feminine. Nevertheless, Logan stumped for Garfield throughout Illinois and Indiana, rousing up support from everyone he could muster. The Democratic opponent was also a Civil War general, Winfield Scott Hancock. The bloody shirt that Logan waved in previous elections wouldn't work as well against the popular Hancock, who also took a bullet for the Union, just like Logan. In the end, Garfield won with less than 10,000 votes, but the Electoral College vote was a much wider margin, with Garfield getting 214 to Hancock's 155. Garfield considered Logan for a cabinet position, but Logan didn't want it. However, he did counsel Garfield in selecting a cabinet member. Logan recommended Abraham Lincoln's only surviving child, Robert Todd Lincoln, as the Secretary of War. Garfield agreed to the recommendation. Logan attended Garfield's inauguration and then began his responsibilities as a U.S. Senator. Just a week or two after the inauguration, as Logan was getting dressed to attend Congress, he walked into his reception room at his boarding house and was startled by an unannounced visitor sitting in a chair by the door. The man was oddly dressed, rubber galoshes with no stockings on his feet, no coat, and very light pants for the late winter season. The man claimed to be one of Logan's constituents and wanted him to sign a recommendation that the strange man had written to become Garfield's consul general to France. Logan treated him kindly, but ushered him out of his room. The next morning, the strange man returned. Again, Logan removed him from his home. After getting rid of him for the second time, Logan pulled his landlady aside and pointed out the man, telling her that he didn't need to be hanging around the boarding house. As the strange man sat at a table eating, she asked why. Logan said, "I think he is a little off in the head." He knew little about the man except his name, Charles Guiteau. Logan summered in his Chicago home with Mary, and it was there that he received the news from Robert Todd Lincoln that President Garfield had been shot by Charles Guiteau. The president would linger for a few months, but died. Chester A. Arthur took over as president. Logan's health continued to deteriorate with attacks of rheumatism confining him to his room. He did, however, find enough strength one day to engage in a bit of sport with some young men target practicing. They were shooting at glass bottles, and Logan wanted to show them how horrible of an aim they were. Logan bet boxes of cigars that he was a better shot than they were. The young men took the old general's bet. Logan declared that he would start shooting at 12 bottles, and he would continue until he missed one. The first shot landed, as well as the next 11, displaying to the young men that Logan hadn't lost the ability to deliver a good volley. Since the 1870s, the Logans had been grandparents. Their daughter Dorothy, although they always called her Dolly, lived in Chicago in the family home. Their son Manning officially changed his name to John A. Logan II in honor of his father. Logan also got his son an appointment to West Point in 1883. An ironic move, since Blackjack had been treated as substandard during the war for being a volunteer and not professionally trained. Logan's finances didn't improve. He had to subsist on his $5,000 a year salary from the Senate. However, he always fed his book addiction. His personal library contained over 5,000 volumes, from classics to historical works. He tried to curtail his family's spending and lectured Mary on being frugal with their money. However, one day, as Logan attended the Senate, Mary found a delivery man at the door with $300 worth of books. Logan knew the books would be delivered that day and purposefully stayed out late to delay the confrontation with his wife. He came home to find the books lined up in the home with Mary standing by them. Logan said, "I know I have been foolish, but I could not resist them when I dropped by Loudermilk's for a few moments." Blackjack and Mary traveled to Santa Fe, New Mexico, where their daughter and son-in-law were stationed. There, Logan had to put out another political fire. He and his son-in-law, Will Tucker, were accused of pushing members of the Zuni tribe off their land by claiming water rights on the reservation. Logan denied it, but President Arthur used an executive order to force Logan's son-in-law off the land. While he was out west, he, as a senator, participated in the Dawes Commission in assessing the Sioux Indian tribe, meeting with Sitting Bull. Logan told the chief that, "The Great Father has appointed you chief, but if not for the government, you would be starving to death in the mountains." Also out west, he visited Yellowstone National Park, a location he helped create by helping to form the U.S. Geological Survey of the region. At the end of 1883 and into early 1884, the call for Logan to be the Republican presidential nominee grew. Logan relished the thought of being elected president and began to work towards that end. Grant even threw his support to Logan in March 1884. At the Republican National Convention, Logan's name was thrown into the hat, but he garnered just around 60 votes, compared to the other leading candidates' 300 or so votes. James Blaine was in the lead against John Sherman and President Arthur, and in that, Logan found a silver lining. If he could shift his votes to Blaine, then he could put him over the top. Logan could then be named the vice presidential nominee. Following Blaine's official nomination, Logan was chosen as his running mate. Logan began a fast-paced campaign schedule, delivering 6 to 15 speeches a day, except Sundays, which he took off. None went over 45 minutes, and some went as short as 5 minutes. But if it wasn't for Mary, he would have soon become ragged. As soon as he finished a speech, she whisked him off the stage and took him to a room where she rubbed a whiskey-based ointment on his chest and made him drink hot lemonade, all to keep him from getting hoarse and becoming ill. In November, Logan and Blaine ran against Grover Cleveland. 2 things went against them. Probably the most important was that the Mugwumps, or the independent Republicans, put their support behind the Democratic candidates when they became disgusted by the Republican choices. The second important thing that sealed the deal for Cleveland's victory was that Blaine attended a campaign rally where one of the fellow speakers let loose a tirade toward the Irish and Catholics, upsetting that population in the important state of New York. Cleveland won, ending a 24-year streak of Republican victories. Logan was devastated. When Logan was interviewed about the loss, he answered with an Abraham Lincoln anecdote about a man who stubbed his toe. Logan said, "I'm too big to cry, and it hurts too bad for me to laugh." Logan didn't let the defeat get him down for too long. He now needed to keep his Senate seat since he wouldn't be the vice president. However, there was a problem. The state legislators, who voted for the Senate, were deadlocked, with neither party having the necessary votes. The deadlock drug on for months, but during that time 3 Democratic legislators died. 2 came from heavy Democratic districts, but 1 didn't. So the Republicans decided to get another legislator on their side by doing a still hunt. Republican operatives, disguised as stock buyers, insurance agents, sewing machine agents, and other professionals that gave them acceptable explanations to be in the region, began to honeycomb all the school districts in the 4 counties where they handed trustworthy Republican tickets with William H. Weaver's name on it. Sworn to secrecy, each of these chosen Republicans magnified the vote potential several-fold by selecting up to 5 more clandestine Republicans to carry out the plan. Thousands of tickets were quietly distributed. Each recipient was fed specific instructions not to go to the polls earlier than 3 p.m. and no later than 5 p.m. on May 6th. Only at that time were they to cast their votes in an effort to catch the Democrats entirely off guard. The plan worked as the Democrats had grown too complacent, and they didn't have time to react to the influx of Republican votes. Logan won a seat in the U.S. Senate for the 3rd time. Soon after his election, Logan went to see one of his biggest supporters and dying friend, Ulysses S. Grant. They reminisced about the war and politics, and Logan left with even more respect for the old general. On the night of June 12, 1885, at the Washington home of the Logans, the African-American community gathered to celebrate the election of Logan to the Senate. His fight for civil rights garnered their respect and love, and they wanted to show him how much he meant to them. Logan came out of his home and addressed the crowd. He told them that they have been known in this country for long years past as a downtrodden race. Whatever I have been able to do to elevate them and give them the rights that belong to every citizen has always been done. They are men, they are American citizens, and they are entitled to all rights that any other man and American citizen is entitled to. At the end of his short speech, he welcomed as many of them as could pass through his home to come through so he could thank each one of them personally. Over 1,000 African Americans walked into the Logan home and clasped hands with the general. Also that summer, Logan paid one more visit to his friend, Ulysses S. Grant. He acted as one of the pallbearers for his funeral. Before the congressional session began, Logan tried to write a book centered around slavery's role in the coming of the Civil War, called The Great Conspiracy. He toiled every day to meet a strict timetable, hoping to complete it before returning to the Senate. Only revisions were needed by the time he returned to the Capitol Dome. When it was published, it wasn't well received, and the sales were lackluster. But he didn't have time to dwell on that problem, as he needed to take part in Senate debates. His bill to raise the pension of wounded veterans was shot down, and a bill to investigate the progress of African Americans since the Civil War was also voted down. He voted in support of a bill that would help fight illiteracy, particularly in black communities, by building schools in underserved areas. The Senate worked hard to craft the bill, and even though the Senate passed the bill, the House of Representatives voted it down because of it targeting black children who suffered the most with illiteracy. Although The Great Conspiracy didn't take off, one book that Logan authored did, called Uncle Daniel's Story of Tom Anderson and 20 Great Battles. It was a fictitious work about the Civil War where Logan used the title character, Uncle Daniel, to tell the story. Logan changed the names of battles and people, but he essentially retells the story of his time in the war. It began gaining traction when The Great Conspiracy didn't. Logan led the initiative to create a cyclorama painting featuring the Battle of Atlanta. Logan hoped it would be ready in time for his presidential run in 1884, but delays pushed the debut of the painting back. In anticipation of being nominated by the Republican Party for the presidency in the next election, he and Mary set off for a cross-country tour, taking a train to California, where Logan was met with large crowds at San Francisco. Then he took a train and a stagecoach to Portland, Oregon, where 7,000 people came to see him. At Buttesville, he found a moment of relaxation, discovering a hammock swinging in a grape arbor. He got into the hammock and began to hum Swing Low, Sweet Chariots. All of a sudden, the hammock broke, and he came crashing down on some apples. He wasn't injured, but his pride took a hit. He rounded out the Western tour with trips to Nevada and Puget Sound. Upon returning, Logan worked feverishly to complete his third book, an argument for having an all-volunteer army instead of a professional army, entitled Volunteer Soldier of America. Mark Twain's publishing company agreed to print the book. He completed it in December 1886. Soon after its completion, Logan was struck with an attack of rheumatism that had been plaguing him for years. He was confined to a bed for a great deal of December. Then on December 22nd, he took a turn for the worse. On Christmas Eve, the doctor pronounced that Logan's illness had moved to his brain, something he called cerebral rheumatism, and he wasn't optimistic about the outcome. Logan lay in bed at his Washington home, the only home he purchased in Washington, something he had done relatively recently. The day after Christmas, the doctor said he wouldn't survive the day. He lay propped up on a plain mahogany bedstead on the second floor of the home, unconscious. His family and some of his friends, including General Philip Sheridan, surrounded him, watching each breath he took. He produced 2 guttural exhalations and breathed his last breath at 2:57 p.m. on December 26, 1886. In response to Logan's death, the formerly enslaved abolitionist Frederick Douglas wrote of John A. Logan, "It is only needed to say that he was the dread of traitors, the defender of loyal soldiers, and the true friend of the newly made citizens of the Republic. Much was predicated for our cause on this man's future, but he too, in the order of Providence, has laid off his armor." He was temporarily buried in the tomb of a family friend at Rock Creek Cemetery, but would be removed to a granite memorial in the National Cemetery of the Soldiers' Home, next to the Rock Creek burial ground. Mary Logan, the constant companion and mastermind of many of his campaigns, never remarried. On the contrary, she dedicated an entire wing of their home to her husband, putting up pictures and relics from his life on full display for anyone who visited the home. Her and their daughter would help organize the District of Columbia Society of the Dames of the Loyal Legion of the United States. Mary wrote a widely bought book entitled Reminiscences of a Soldier's Wife, which was published in 1913. She continued to keep her husband's name alive by writing articles and being a constant invited guest at Union soldier reunions. She influenced her husband's support of women's suffrage, but his bill to investigate the subject on the floor of the Senate never made it off the ground. She would continue the fight herself for the right of women to vote. She got to see the 19th Amendment passed before she passed away in February 1923. In the years following Logan's death, 5 statues were erected in his honor. The Atlanta cyclorama, which was originally titled Logan's Great Battle, no longer carries that name, but is still on display, and the state song of Illinois boasts his name in their stanzas. John A. Logan's life represents one of the great transformations in American history, which teaches us that people in the past are like us, they change over time. Logan, like all people, wasn't a stagnant figure in his ideas or actions. He started as a pro-slavery politician from southern Illinois, advocating for throwing black people out of his home state and forbidding them from entering it. When the Civil War broke out, he didn't exactly believe that secession was right, but he absolutely believed that the U.S. government shouldn't coerce the South back into the Union. He spoke against Abraham Lincoln raising an army, but when one of those armies moved into Virginia, Logan, as a U.S. congressman, fired a rifle at the Confederates at the First Battle of Bull Run, helping to change his mind about the war. He then became an advocate of suppressing the rebellion, but protested anything that resembled emancipation. However, the war changed that. Logan rose up from colonel to major general, taking part in the battles of Fort Henry and Donelson, the Vicksburg Campaign, and the Atlanta Campaign. He helped facilitate the surrender of the largest Confederate force of the war at Bennett Place in North Carolina. At the end of the war, he returned to politics, but with a different mindset and a different party. He now sat in the House and the Senate as a Republican and fought for civil rights for African Americans, promoting schools and trying to end illiteracy. He was proud of his Civil War service, waving the bloody shirt in the faces of those who fought against the Union or opposed the war. The Civil War defined him and brought about his change, and he couldn't have done all that without the support of his wife Mary, who cared for him when he was ill during the war, helped run his campaigns, proofread his writings, and took care of him. He longed for the presidency, but it eluded him. His lifestyle hurt him financially, and he became embroiled in multiple scandals, but he never let those scandals hold him back, or back down from a fight or a rebuttal to such accusations. The war that came to define him ultimately led to his demise because of the illness contracted on the fields of battle. But the one-time commander of the Army of the Tennessee, one of the Union's preeminent units, deserves recognition for his service to his country and his ability to show students of history that people in the past aren't stagnant. They change and evolve over time. He transformed from Dirty Work Logan to Blackjack Logan in the space of a couple of years, in which he solidified his role as a dedicated Union man, the founder of Memorial Day, a beloved friend of Ulysses S. Grant, and a favorite son of the state of Illinois.